ones who apply the laws to help keep order in our societies throughout the region. Good evening, I'm Julian Reed, and welcome to this broadcast of the opening ceremony of the Conference of the Caribbean Chief Justices and Heads of Judiciary. My special guest, Justice Constance Delancey. Welcome to the broadcast.
Thank you.
Great. Now they're here. We have people from all around the region. Like you said, Chief Justices and Heads of Judiciary here to compare challenges and map out strategies for the future. I believe this started in 1998. Can you give us a little background about this conference?
Yes. So in 1998, the Chief Justices of the region decided that they needed a forum in which they could discuss in a safe environment challenges that we're having, also to feed off each other in terms of ideas of how to improve the delivery of justice.
Now, how useful has this been for the Bahamas?
It has been incredibly useful because we have bonded with the various heads of judiciary around the Caribbean. It's been beneficial in terms of training judicial officers, training staff, improving how we approach the delivery of services in our courts.
And let's explain to people, I think most people know, but let's explain how the judiciary is set up and the different layers of the judiciary.
Okay, so at the lowest level, you will have your lay magistrates who are our out-island administrators. And then the next level will be our stipendary and circuit magistrates. There are our registrars, and then there are justice in the Supreme Court. And then there is the Court of Appeal. And of course, the apex court would be the Privy Council.
Now we have about 10 participants that will be in this opening ceremony, and then over the next 2 days until Friday, they will be in closed sessions,
yes.
Trying to get their work done. You've participated in conferences like this, and speak about the benefit that's accrued to someone in your capacity.
So in my capacity as a judicial officer, having the heads of judiciary come together and discuss things that we need to improve upon, ways that we can exchange information, ideas, training is extremely beneficial. Because when you are sitting in as a judge, your learning never ends. It is continuous. And the best way to improve your skills is to have someone train you, and it's on-the-job training. So what better way to have someone who's experienced mentor you the next step?
Now, the important thing about this is to really, people in our region, we have more commonalities than we have differences. So I'm sure you're seeing similar cases, and like you said earlier, that you just have to tweak them.
Yes.
To make them to our advantage.
Exactly, because you find that we are more alike than we are different throughout the Caribbean and the region. And so a lot of the challenges that we are facing in society are challenges that our brothers and sisters in Jamaica, Trinidad, for example, are facing the same challenges. And so if they have found the way to, for example, speed up the disposition of a case, why not learn from that?
No, it's true. And that is a major challenge, right? Having shorter cases or shorter periods for cases. Let's talk about some of the things that they expect to discuss during this this conference. And the thing that which is something that everyone has to focus on now, is AI, artificial intelligence, and advanced technology. Give us a little insight as to how that is a sort of major focus of judiciaries, not just around the region, but really around the world now.
You will find that, we've come full circle, because when we had hosted this prior in 2011, back when Sir Michael was our Chief Justice, right. The forum then was discussing the impact of technology on the delivery of justice. And now the hot topic around the world and around the region is how to responsibly use AI. What protocols can we put in place to safely use AI effectively in the delivery of justice? And I do suspect that will be a very hot topic with our heads of judiciaries.
Can you give us some examples? You gave me one off air. How AI could prove to be a very dangerous situation.
It can prove very dangerous because, for example, if you have attorneys that are giving you cases that are not actually cases, using, for example, ChatGPT to do their submissions, it creates a case that does not exist. And if you just blindly accept that case, it could mean the difference between someone winning or losing who should not have won or lost.
And also, I hear with Chad GTP, you get a lot of factual errors too.
Exactly.
So you're really setting yourself up for a problem.
Exactly. And so the judicial officer has to guard against that. Remember, we are the guardians of the rule of law. And so we have to make sure that we act responsibly and be prudent. And we can't just accept what is blindly given to us. So we have to do our fact-checking as well.
In the Bahamas, what are the challenges of the judiciary? I'm sure we have nowhere near as many jurists at your level that we need to do the work we have.
I think some of our challenges are physical challenges. For example, like a lot of our agencies throughout the Caribbean, we are in buildings that are not built for the purpose. We've inherited buildings that we have to retrofit. And so hopefully one day we will have a building that is bespoke specifically for the judiciary. We have it now, for the most part, with our family law that we launched. And we have what we call public spaces, and we have safe spaces for witnesses, etc. So you will find that that's a big challenge. Challenges also, the jury pool seems to be shrinking. With the onset of social media, the minute crime is committed, it's all over the social platform. So people are exposed. Exactly.
Or you don't have an opinion.
Exactly.
Are you finding, though, that with juries, in jury selection, is there a challenge with people trying to decline doing their citizen's duty?
That is not something that is unique to the Bahamas. You will find throughout the world and internationally and regionally, folks are either afraid to serve on jury or they're reluctant because they will take time off their job. And so there is a real challenge with convincing people sometimes to do their civic duty.
So technology, what other kinds of aspects of technology do you suspect might be discussed during this meeting?
Well, we've introduced around the region the technology of digital recording. The backroom challenge of that is getting a decent transcript transcribed, because in each of our region we have our own peculiar vernacular. We have our own peculiar way of saying stab is juk over here and something like that. And so you will find that the challenge is getting those transcripts that are accurate. So we have an accurate record with the recording. But if someone says, I want it transcribed, then someone has to sit down and transcribe that, meaning listen to it and transcribe it. And we do have improvement with that, because we do have the initial rough transcript we can get from the recording, again using AI.
So it's very beneficial.
Exactly.
But, you just got to watch out for
exactly.
Great. Now, you also talked about because we raised the issue about seeing the number of prisoners being transported into the courts downtown, and we talked about how Zoom changed everything during the pandemic, and Zoom is still being used in the judicial system. Yeah, so we're at in the judicial systems in the Bahamas and around the region, we're still using some level of virtual hearings. But if you are coming to a criminal court to be tried, you are physically in that court. Yes. They can further remand you virtually. They can maybe even take a plea from you virtually. But you ought to be in court to face your accuser. And that's a constitutional right. And so the buses you see coming now are people who are actually coming in for actual hearings, not for remand. So we've reduced the amount of people who are coming. You don't see several buses interrupting traffic coming down. It's usually only one bus. But I also would think that might make things a little bit more efficient, a little bit easier for you as well. It does. It does, because if you look at the back end, which the public doesn't see, you have the police having to make sure to provide escort. They have to be escorted to the various courts. Someone has to be there to meet them. They have to be processed. And, of course, they have to be taken to the various courts. Mm-hmm. So all of the logistics of how that happens, the public does not see. And that requires a tremendous amount of manpower. And time. And time, yes. And money. And money, exactly. Let's talk about some of the other things that are common in the region. Humans, drugs, gun trafficking. Oh, yeah. A big deal for all of us, really. Yeah, we will find that because we are in the Atlantic region, in the Caribbean, and it's not unique to the Bahamas, we still have issues with human smuggling. We still have issues with drug trafficking, and even weapons trafficking.
And because we are a group of islands, it's very difficult to police your border when your border consists of several, in the Bahamas, 700 island rocks, keys. I mean, come on. It's pretty difficult to do that.
It is, yeah.
And so you find that those topics are topics that are always on the agenda when judicial officers get together. How do we tackle that? How do we deal with that? How are you effectively dealing with, for example, a boatload of irregular migrants in terms of, because you don't have maybe capacity for a courtroom for 50 people? How do you deal with that? And so we would trade ideas. How did you deal with it? What type of sentencings are you using? How are you dealing with your improving, or have there been changes to your immigration laws, etc.? That kind of stuff.
Yeah, so all of these things, it's
always
yes. Changing,
always, yes.
Mm-hmm. Now let's talk about something that you say is not new, but we're hearing more about now, which is plea deals. How has that improved the justice system, in your opinion?
Well, we've had plea deals on the books for a while. There was a reluctance by a lot of the persons who were charged with offenses to enter a plea deal. But if the evidence is there and it's placed before you, you have a choice. Once they get proper legal advice and it's explained to them, we find that persons are now more open to the idea of accepting a plea deal. Because if the evidence is clearly clear-cut and you're facing 30 years, and the fella is saying, okay, if you take a plea, maybe cut it down by a third, it's a win-win for you because the victim has felt that they've been heard. The case has been dealt with. That saves time, money, resources, and the heartache of the witness having to get on this, the victim getting on the stand. For example, a rape victim getting on the stand, having to face her accuser, and having to tell a whole courtroom full of people what happened to her.
Yeah, that's
or him.
Extremely difficult.
Or even him, yeah.
Yeah. Well, we're hearing the music of the Royal Bahamas Police Force pop band in the background, which means that we're a little bit closer to the start of this opening ceremony. So shall we give them a little rundown about what's happening and what they can expect during this opening ceremony?
Okay, so during the ceremony, you will be hearing remarks from the Chief Justice of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, and of course, you'll be hearing from our Attorney General, the Honorable L. Ryan Pinder. And one of the things that I think both of them will be highlighting from their own perspective is the challenges that judiciaries are facing. So I expect both of them to highlight that in their remarks.
Good. And then, of course, the keynote address will come from the Prime Minister.
Of course. And, of course, he will be setting the tone because, of course, this particular kind of meeting amongst heads of judiciary kind of mirrors the meeting of CARICOM heads when they come and they discuss those things as well. So I'm sure the Prime Minister will be able to lay out in his remarks the things from perspective of the people, what they're looking for from their judiciary. And that might prompt a discussion amongst the heads of judiciary when they get into a meeting.
You know, one thing, right? We all know, no matter what you do, the importance of networking. So a forum like this, really, you can't really measure the kind of benefits you're going to get from it, can you?
You can. This is not a forum you can measure in dollars and cents, but I think you see the positive impact when we improve the way we process a case, how quickly we hear a case. So while you might not see it up front, it trickles down at every level of judiciary.
That's great. Well, we're going to have to compete with the band a little bit here, but let's talk about some other things that may come on the agenda. Before that, let's talk about the Caribbean Court of Justice, which the Bahamas is not a part of.
Right.
But we do have a good rapport with them, don't we?
Yes, we do. The Caribbean, the CCJ, has been around for some 20 years now. And although they are not our court that we go to for final appeal, we do benefit from a lot of training from the CCJ judges, for both the judges, the staff, and we also benefit in terms of the cases because we've recently improved and changed our rules for hearing civil cases. And so now we can pull from the decisions that have been made at CCJ that impact us in terms of how we would deal for a particular principle of law, because they would already adjudicate on it, heard the arguments. We're ahead of the game because now we can look and read what they considered and say, okay, maybe this applies to our region as well.
That's great. Now, there's obviously one thing that we have in common. Well, there's many things we have in common, but something that's a challenge for all of us still, and that's the issue of capital punishment. Right? A lot of people say, "Oh, we went to the CCJ. We'll deal with that right in a minute," but that's not necessarily so, is it?
No, it's not, because you find that around the region, well, we may have capital punishment on the books. As we all know, our Privy Council said, well, it has to be the worst of the worst. Well, that leaves the judge who is hearing the matter in terms of presiding over the case when it's time for sentencing to look at the pros and the cons, so we call the mitigating and aggravating factor, to determine, is this a criteria we can call the worst of the worst? And that's on a case-by-case basis. So until we come up with an actual set of protocols, a checklist, per se.
Well, if you will, explain to the people what kind of factors go into the decision-making of a judge in a case. What are the mitigating factors, things like that? What all do you have to take into account?
Okay, so...
because I know some people say, what? That's what...
Exactly.
How do you get that?
So I'll give you an example. If you have a young man who's in front of you, let's say he's charged with firearms,
right,
which we know is a very serious offense.
Yes.
You have to look at things. Mitigating factors would be his age. Has he been charged before the court before? Is this his first time? Did he plead guilty at first instance, save the taxpayers money in terms of having a trial? Does he have anybody who's depending on him? Is he having children, elderly parents? What role does he play in the community? Those kind of things you look at. And then aggravating factors was, how was the gun used? The level or the increase of gun-related violence in our society. That's an aggravating factor. And of course you would look at, what did the superior courts look at in terms of sentencing? For example, Court of Appeal might say that 5 years might be too harsh in this instance. And they might say 3 years might be a better one. Because you have to look at the cases that come before you to determine, along with the evidence and the mitigating and aggravating factor, what would be the best sentence would come up in the circumstances.
Because although some people might not agree with it, there has to be fair treatment. Everyone is entitled to unproven innocent. Innocent until proven guilty.
Yes, our society is based on the premise that you are presumed innocent until you either of your own free will, having gotten legal advice, say you're guilty, or a jury of your peers, or the evidence proves that you are. And so you have that right. The presumption is just because the police has arrested you and charged you does not mean you are guilty.
True.
And, people in society tend to feel that way sometimes. That, social media is flashes all around. You've seen the wanted posters. People say, oh, well, he's a bad guy. So
he's dead in the water.
He's dead in the water. So why did you let him walk out scot-free? Or why did you even bail? Because you're entitled to it. If you have not been convicted, you are innocent. Therefore, if you qualify for bail, you ought to be out on bail. It's a constitutional right. But by the same token, if you are a risk to not just society, but even yourself, of getting out of bail, you might have to stay on.
And if we sort of get rid of these things that we know are constitutional rights, doesn't that really sort of start to the degradation of society?
It erodes the very thing that our forefathers fought for.
Yeah.
And so we have to hold the constitutional sacred. You have to start from that. You should never, ever forget the person is entitled to constitutional rights. I mean, it would make that just a meaningless document.
Let's turn to legal aid now. We know that a lot of people who end up before the courts, and really representation is not cheap.
No, it isn't.
Right? What is the legal aid system like in the country now?
So we have two avenues for legal aid. There is the one where the government sponsors it in terms of you get a lawyer on a roster. That lawyer then is paid from the public purse. For example, if you were charged with an indictable offense, you can't afford an attorney. So you would have the lawyer appointed, they sign a contract, they're paid from the public purse. That is what we would do in that instance. And then the other one is you would hire a public defender from the public defender's office. Okay? And so those are the two things that are happening. But believe it or not, lawyers have a duty to do a certain amount of pro bono work. I remember our former Prime Minister Perry Christie always said to us, you're a lawyer, but you also have to be in society and you're supposed to give back. And we are actually mandated as lawyers to give back by doing pro bono work. So not every case you see a lawyer taking, they're being paid for.
I mean, some people would be very surprised to hear that.
Yeah.
Now, there's another thing that I thought was interesting, too. I knew that it was in the work, but I didn't realize it was already underway. A choice of trial by judge or jury.
Oh, yeah.
How does that go?
So a lot of our judiciaries around the region and internationally have already gone to this, where you can opt, you can decide after you've gotten legal advice whether you want your case heard before a judge and jury, meaning the judge alone can hear your case, or you can be heard by a jury of peers. That is happening now in the Bahamas. There may be some reluctance, people saying, well, it's going to be harder to convince a judge than it would be to convince the man on the street. So it is there and it is an option. So we have to be on the same page with everyone else. So there has to be a system where if the man in Jamaica, Trinidad, etc., has the same option, the question is, why aren't we offering the same option here to our people in the Bahamas?
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. How are we getting through the backlogs? I know that this was a concern for a long time, for many years, and I think plea deals were meant to be an avenue to help reduce that.
Yes.
Are we seeing a significant reduction?
We are seeing a reduction slowly by use of plea deals. Because, of course, as a case is adjourned further down the line, there are issues with how effectively can you prosecute, how effectively can you defend. Because you may have situations where witnesses may have died, the evidence may be degrading. It may be to the benefit of the person who's charged to take a plea deal, a shorter sentence, and they're out because they may not have qualified for bail and they're languishing in prison.
Now, getting back to the program here, which should start in less than 10 minutes, we're hearing the lovely sounds of the pop band, but there's also going to be some other entertainment. They're going to see our young people perform, the Bahamas National Youth Choir.
I'm looking forward to that.
They've never, ever let us down, have they?
No, this is a group of dedicated, wonderful young people. They are known around the world, like our police band. People talk about our young children and the tremendous amount of talent that we have in this small country.
And after their hard work here, the chief justices and heads of judiciary will get a chance to experience a little bit about Bahamas.
Oh, yes, we
can. Get a chance to go in our beautiful waters.
We cannot allow our visitors to come to the Bahamas and not get sand in their shoes. That's where we get them to come back.
I tell you, even though they may come from the sea, from islands too, but it's a little bit different in the Bahamas.
There's no place like the Bahamas. There's no place like the waters of the Bahamas and the sand in the Bahamas. You are unique in the world.
They're also going to have a youth rake and scrape band today, too.
Oh, yes.
So then closing remarks. So we suspect that this whole thing may take about an hour and a half. About that. Yeah.
About that.
And tomorrow they get into their closed sessions.
Yes. And tomorrow and Thursday and Friday will be closed.
And it is exclusive to Chief Justices.
It is exclusive. It is a closed session so that they have a safe space to frankly discuss the issues that they are facing.
Good. Well, we should be getting underway in about 6 minutes, and we're seeing some people filling up in here.
Yes.
I'm sure that the Chief Justice come with their mini entourages. I don't think they're coming with big ones, but...
No, well, most of them are accompanied by their spouses or significant others. And so our First Lady in the Judiciary, Chief Justice's wife, will be entertaining the spouses.
Now, tell me again, you are a Justice of the Supreme Court.
Yes, I am.
All right, and you started off in your public defender work as a juvenile.
Yeah, so I started off in private practice. I joined Judiciary in 2011 as a children's magistrate in juvenile court. I was called up to the Supreme Court to be in the registrar's office. I actually worked for a number of years as the court's administrator for the entire Judiciary for a while. And that was a fun job. I got to meet a lot of persons from around the Bahamas. And then last year in November, I was sworn in by our lovely Governor General as one of the judges of the Supreme Court. And I do primarily commercial and civil court and family court in our northern region.
Wow.
Yes.
Wow. So you move about.
No, I'm actually assigned, and I belong to the people of the northern region of the Commonwealth of Bahamas.
I tell you. But being in juvenile, your experience there must give you a completely different perspective.
Oh, yeah.
And it changes the way you look at cases?
It did. I tell people that I got a wonderful introduction into the judiciary by being the children's magistrate. No, notice I don't say juvenile court. Being the children's magistrate, because that's how I see myself. I realized that the impact that little court has on our society is tremendous. I always tell people it was the hardest job I ever had and the most rewarding to date that I've ever had, because I saw justice in real time be impactful with our young people who are our future. And so I knew, and it was very difficult because I felt a lot of pressure, because I knew that if I made a mistake, the ramification of that could be reverberated throughout that child's life, all the way up into adulthood. And so I would think twice, I would mull over things, we would discuss things, and the beautiful thing about being in juvenile court, you're not by yourself, you're in a panel. So you have two wonderful people, right from regular society, who are chosen, and they come and they help you. They provide a sounding board. They make sure that you never forget to empathize, to look at the perspective from the child, the parent, the victim, where they're going to go back to. How do we help them beyond just what they came here for? They might need reading skills. They may need anger management. They may need drug treatment. All of those things you deal with. And in being in that court, I got to work with social services. I worked with the educators, with the Ministry of Education, all of the children's homes. So it was a very wonderful experience, and I wouldn't trade it for anything in the world.
And tell us about those occasions when, years later, some of the people who came, young people who came before you, came back to say thank you.
Oh, yes. Now, that is, you can't measure that feeling when a child comes up to you and say, and the code word when they were in children's court was not magistrate, it was D. When they called me as D, I knew that was one of my children. And they would say, look, I remember one kid saying they were setting up lights in Rawson Square for Christmas one day. And he put me aside. He said, Miss D, I strung these lights. I'm in charge of this area now. I felt so proud.
Now, of course, we're going to have the entrance of all of the justices.
Yes.
And I think you have, I don't know, you may not have your iPad on now, but they come in alphabetical. Well, first they start off with R for Chief Justice.
Yes.
Right, then they go into alphabetical order after that.
They generally come in alphabetical order, yeah. So they will call them up. Each Chief Justice will walk with his or her flag. And so you will see the flag for Barbados with the Chief Justice from Barbados, the flag for Belize with the Chief Justice for Belize, the flag for Cayman Islands with the Chief Justice for Cayman Islands. So it isn't just the CARICOM heads of judiciaries who are coming, but judiciaries from, say, Bermuda, Turks and Caicos, and Cayman, who are in fact British territories.
Oh, wow.
Yes.
That's great. I'm going to ask you to do one thing before we get started with the actual program. For young people who think they may have a talent for legal work, tell them why they should be part of the judiciary, the public defender side, as opposed to the private sector side, which you once were.
Yes. Because you cannot have a society if you don't contribute. And this is a wonderful way to contribute. If you don't have someone who's up there looking out for rights, then society falls apart. So yes, this is a great.
That's great. Now, any other things you want to add that we may not have touched on that you'd like to comment before we toss it to the stage? We got a few minutes before that.
I think that one of the things you should always keep in mind that someone has to be the gatekeeper for the Constitution, and that's the job of the judiciary. Never forget that.
Wow, that's great. Every time I hear the police force pop band, I'm amazed, They put you in such a good mood, don't they?
Yes, they do. And they're world famous.
Well, we had to talk over them today, but... Yeah, so again, we'll get started, and the chairperson for today is Mr. Jerome Sawyer, the broadcaster, and there will be the introduction of the Chief Justices and posting of the flags by the Royal Bahamas Defence Force. Then we will have the national anthem by the Pop Force Band. The prayer will be led by Reverend Carla Kalma, and then Sir Ian will give welcoming remarks. And then we'll hear from our Attorney General, Honorable Ryan Pinto KC, and more entertainment from the Youth Choir, introduction of the Prime Minister, more entertainment from the Youth Rake and Scrape Band, and then closing remarks.
Yes.
Now, we were talking about the Remand Center at one point, and you were saying that it is not really, even though it's close to the prison, it is all, and it has to be away from the prison.
Yeah, it's actually not on the prison compound. It's near to it. You can't remand someone if they're in custody. So, and
if you're in custody if you're in prison.
Exactly. And so while it's close by and proximity, it is not on prison property.
Wow.
Yeah.
I'm going to give you this opportunity. If some young people might be looking, give them a little bit of advice how to stay out of trouble. If you could. I know that's a bit of a challenge. But.
It is a bit of a challenge because I think, as teenagers especially, we push boundaries. Surround yourself with positive people. If you have someone who's in your friend circle who is not, has the same goal as you do in life, I don't mean in terms of, becoming a doctor or a lawyer, but in terms of contributing positively to society, that's not your friend. And so you may have to make the really hard decision to walk away. Because not everyone who is smiling in your face is your friend. Like I used to tell the kids in children's court, would you rather be a successful fisherman or the chairman of Walk Street and Company? Because you could get in trouble that way.
Exactly. And the thing is, younger people now have to make that decision at a younger and younger age each time. Peer pressure, bullying. And
our kids are exposed to a lot more at a younger age. I mean, when I grew up, we had one TV in our house, and it was a black and white 13-inch Centurion. I remember that.
It's changed. Now nobody needs to watch TV.
You don't need to.
On the phone.
Exactly. And you don't know what they're watching.
True.
And, before COVID, we as parents said you don't want to give your child a phone. And then COVID came around, they had to have a phone. Now how do you take it back?
You can't. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And so your 9-year-old's walking around with an iPhone 15 in his pocket.
Yeah, now see, that's another problem.
Okay, then.
Because I don't even have that. But anyway. But I don't know. It's a lot of challenges, but obviously we're dealing with them one by one.
Of course. Mm-hmm. Of course. And each challenge is unique. Mm-hmm. There is no cookie-cutter solution. I don't think there can be.
I'll tell you something that the Prime Minister of Jamaica told young people. It's summertime there, and I think that their organizations expect to accommodate up to 20,000 children, young people, for summer employment. And he says, we're trying to sort of have this risk reduction.
Yes.
And by risk reduction, I mean it don't pay to be in no gang nowadays.
Exactly.
So you're taking a major risk.
Exactly.
And the dividends ain't so great.
They're not. Because one of the things you learn in children's court is that you have a hierarchy in gangs. And the children you see in front of you are the foot soldiers, or we call cannon fodder. Not the person who is reaping the benefit of committing the armed robbery.
But they're taking the big risks.
Exactly. For no reward and ruining their futures. Because even if they get out of the gang, they may still have people who come back and haunt them later on in life and say, point them, well, you used to be in that, you used to run with that crew. And so sometimes that stigma stays with you.
Justice, let's take this opportunity to remind young people, if they happen to be watching, you never know, what's at stake, what they could lose if they get a conviction.
At the highest level, their freedom. Because depending on what you are charged with, you may have to be tried like an adult in an adult court. And if you are, for example, charged with murder, you may face prison. And you may be there for a very long time. And when you come out, if you do come out, society has moved on. And so you may find...
to assimilate.
Exactly. Now, for some kids, it may be a positive experience because they may learn a trade. And I've had that children come up to me and say, Miss Z, the best thing you could have done for me was send me there. I learned how to be a mechanic. I now have a skill. I didn't have a chance to have that skill before. So there are some positive things that are coming out of our institutions. But then you have, people who become institutionalized. They've been there so long, they come out, they don't know how to interact with society anymore. So at the highest level and at the lowest level, it could be that the only person remembers about you is that you've been to prison and then you get a label jailbird. And the level of trust that people have in you has been lowered. And you have an uphill battle the rest of your life to build that trust back. The person may not want to hire you, no matter how good your skill is. No matter how they may need your skill, they may be reluctant to hire you if you have a record. Even though we say you're rehabilitated, the average man on the street might say, I don't want to take a chance. And you can't force him to take a chance.
So it really just is not worth it on any level.
It's not worth it.
And particularly when there's so much talent among young people that they could put into positive avenues.
Oh, yes.
And really help build this country and the world, really.
And the world. And I can tell you, we have, in juvenile court, in children's court, we have sent children to institutions like BTVI to learn skills. Rather than send them to a prison or send them to one of the centers, no, go to school, learn a skill. Come back and show me that certificate in how you're wiring a house. Show me a certificate that you can be a mechanic now. Show me a certificate you're a chef. You are chasing your dream. And you give them that opportunity. Because rehabilitation should always be the key when you're dealing with children. But, you have instances where children have so many different challenges, not just coming to court with being charged. There may be issues of neglect at home, issues of abuse, not having a father, or having a mom or a dad who has to work 2 and 3 jobs who's never there to pay the bills.
Every one of us has to get involved in some way. Eh?
Yes, and the old saying, "It takes a village." Well,
truer than ever now.
It is truer than ever. Yes, and before you could pull a child over and chastise a child that don't do that, but now they confront you, and not in a very positive way. And if a parent doesn't back you up, they join and say, "Oh, don't touch my child," or "Don't speak to my child, don't chastise my child." I think we've lost a lot of that. As I know in the community I grew up in, every old lady's house I passed, I had to say good day or good afternoon, whether they could hear me or not.
It's true, anyway. But, someone said years ago that, and this was a sort of child prodigy, and says, you really have to realize that children are really just little adults.
Yes, they are.
So you really have, and their minds are, always seeking information.
And they see solutions that you don't see.
They do. So really, you just have to talk to them. I have a little nephew. I try to talk to him like an adult.
Right.
Like someone you respect,
yes.
which is what you have to do.
Yes.
And usually the outcome is better. Well, we're just waiting now for the program to start. And we are going to send it to the podium now, I believe, from my producers here. We're going to the podium. Great. We'll be back with some more commentary at the end of the program.
visiting justices and their flag bearers from the Royal Bahamas Defense Force. The Honorable Justice Leslie Hayes, K.A., Chief Justice of the Republic of Barbados. Justice Louise E. Blenman, Chief Justice of the Senior Courts of Belize. The Honorable Justice Larry Musenden, Chief Justice of Bermuda. The Honorable Justice Margaret Ramsey Hale, Chief Justice of the Cayman Islands. The Honorable Justice Yonette Cummings Edwards, OR, CCH, Acting Chancellor of the Corporate Republic of Guyana. The Honorable Justice Brian Sykes, OJ, CD, Chief Justice of Jamaica. The Honorable Dinaj Suratan, Senior Judge of the High Court of the Republic of Suriname. The Honorable Justice Ivor Archie, ORTT, Chief Justice of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago. The Organization of the Eastern Caribbean's flag. The Honorable Justice Mabel Igerman, Chief Justice of the Turks and Caicos Islands. The Honorable Justice Winston Anderson, President-Designate of the Caribbean Court of Justice. The Honorable Winston Anderson, President-Designate of the Caribbean Court of Justice. The Honorable Sir Ian Ricardo Winder, KT, Chief Justice of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas.
Ladies and gentlemen, I beg your indulgence a bit longer. I ask that you remain standing for the prayer led by Reverend L.R. Carla Culmer.
Let us pray. We give you thanks, O God, for the conference of the Chief Justices and heads of the Judiciary from around our Caribbean area. We pray, O God, that they will be endued with continued wisdom, innovation, discernment, and courage to lead and to develop strategies and systems that will enhance the judicial systems in all our countries represented. We pray that this time of gathering and conference will serve as a catalyst to inspire, uplift, and to give support to each judicial leader. O Lord, may your continued grace and favor fall on all our national leaders, especially this day, our Governor General, Dame Cynthia Pratt, the Honorable Philip Davis, our Prime Minister, our Chief Justice and host, Ian Winder, all members of the judiciary and legal professions in our country and in our sister nations. May they grow from strength to strength in their leadership. And God, we pray your blessings on today's sessions and this whole conference. We offer all these prayers and petitions to you in the precious and powerful name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
It is my pleasure to invite you to be seated. Again, ladies and gentlemen, welcome. My job tonight as moderator is to simply guide and direct an esteemed panel of speakers. And so my time with you will be short in that regard. For the first time, though, in nearly 15 years, some of the best and brightest legal minds in our region are gathering in the Bahamas. The Conference of the Caribbean Chief Justices and Heads of Judiciary brings together those who are endowed with the honor of leading judiciaries around the country. This is the third time the Bahamas has held this event, and it is my pleasure to welcome now the host Chief Justice, the Honorable Sir Ian Winder, Chief Justice of the Bahamas, to bring opening and welcoming remarks.
Good evening, everyone. I told the moderator that I thought he was going to set the protocol for me. So let me wing it, I guess. Your Excellency, Dame Cynthia Pratt, Right Honorable Prime Minister, Honorable Attorney General, and any other ministers in the House, the past Chief Justices, President of the Court of Appeal, and judges of the Court of Appeal, judges of the Supreme Court, registrars, magistrates, members of the Industrial Tribunal. I see the President of the Bar, members of the Court Service Council, some former Attorney Generals, some former judges of the Supreme Court and Court of Appeal. I see Diane Stewart. I see Miss Alison Maynard Gibson, King's Counsel. I see Justice Rhonda Bain. I see Ruth Bodavel. I see members of Judicial and Legal Service Commission, members of the Bar Council, colleagues, friends, everyone. I save the best for last. My distinguished colleagues from the region, Chief Justices of the CARICOM region. So let me begin by thanking the Master of Ceremonies for so ably setting the tone for us. But permit me nonetheless to recognize, as chair of this conference, that I have the honor, responsibility, and pleasure of welcoming you all to this opening ceremony of the Conference of Caribbean Chief Justices and Heads of Judiciary. And to thank you all for taking the time to share this occasion with us. I extend a warm Bahamian welcome to our visiting Chief Justices and Heads of Judiciary and to their spouses. As you would have heard from the march-in, we have delegates from the court systems of the Republic of Barbados, Belize, Bermuda, the Cayman Islands, the Cooperative Republic of Guyana, Jamaica, the Republic of Suriname, the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, the Turks and Caicos Islands, the Caribbean Court of Justice, and of course the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. Not present with us tonight is the Honorable Mabel Adjiman, Chief Justice of the Turks and Caicos Islands, who would have only just arrived on the island a few minutes ago. She will join us in the morning, perhaps in the evening if our flight's on time, to begin the formal sessions. Apologies were received from the Honorable Margaret Price Finley, Acting Chief Justice of the Eastern Caribbean Supreme Court. Acting Chief Justice Price Finley was only recently appointed to the post and unfortunately unable to attend in person. We shall miss her contributions, but will ensure that she is appraised of our deliberations and receives the materials shared at the conference. Let me pause to extend a special welcome to the Honorable Winston Anderson, President-designate of the Caribbean Court of Justice, a first-time attendee to the conference. She is scheduled to be sworn in as the fourth President of the Caribbean Court of Justice on the 6th of July 2025 in Montego Bay, Jamaica. Justice Anderson, like you, I attended my first conference meeting as a designee 3 years ago, just a few days before I was sworn in as Chief Justice. You will find in this group that every member is willing and eager to assist and share their knowledge and experiences. That has been my experience, both during and between conference meetings. So, Justice Anderson, today I again offer you sincere congratulations and best wishes for a successful tenure as the President of the Caribbean Court of Justice. This year's Heads of Judiciary Conference, being held under the theme Judiciaries in Transition, takes place some 38 years since the first of these such conferences were held in Port of Spain in the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago in 1998. This represents the third time that heads of judiciaries are meeting on our beautiful shores. Meetings were held in 2006 under the chairmanship of Sir Burton Hall and in 2011 under the chairmanship of Sir Michael Barnett. This year's theme builds on the successful conference held last year in Jamaica under the theme Judicial Leadership in an Ever-Changing Environment. We also build on the 2023 meeting in Trinidad and Tobago under the theme Moving Beyond the Familiar, Creating a Judiciary for the Modern World. The objectives of the conference are to be found in the Constitution of the conference, which was adopted at our 6th meeting in Cape Chapel, Belize in 2002. The objectives include to provide a forum for the promotion of fellowship, understanding and functional cooperation for the enhancement of the administration of justice within the jurisdiction of each member state and associate state, to examine judicial problems, whether of a national or regional nature, and to arrive at better solutions to them, to encourage, foster, and promote the development of Caribbean jurisprudence, and to establish links with similar organizations of heads of judiciary in other parts of the world. For public edification, it is important that I take a moment to explain the rationale for our meeting in fulfillment of the objectives of the conference. The administration of justice is a constant work in progress, which benefits from these meetings, allowing us to consult together and address the problems which will arise and to share our collective experiences for the implementation of best practices. The conference agenda reflects the theme, Judiciaries in Transition. Over the next few days, in addition to the business meeting, delegates will hear presentations on judicial leadership, execution of strategic plans, challenges of delayed judgments, drafting an AI policy and guidance for the judiciary, judicial complaints under the constitutional framework of the Caribbean, judicial administration models in the Caribbean, development of curriculums for onboarding of new appointed judicial officers, and development of policies on persons with disabilities and anonymization of sensitive court proceedings. As you would expect, the sessions are closed to allow for the kind of frank exchanges which will permit more meaningful outcomes. We have assembled a strong faculty made up of local, regional, and international talent to facilitate discussions on these important topics. At the risk of being repetitive, I say again, it goes without saying that the administration of justice is a work in progress, and that our collective efforts are necessary to achieve the success we need. The judiciary, the executive, and the legislature are jointly engaged in the business of governance. Each branch has exclusive functions, and while we are separate, we must work closely with each other to ensure good and effective governance for our people. As heads of judiciaries, we recognize that a fully functioning judicial system is vital to the proper functioning of our countries, as a failing judicial system can have severe consequences affecting its governance, economy, and social stability. Some of these consequences include the erosion of the rule of law, delayed justice, economic decline, loss of investor and business sector confidence, and ultimately the erosion of public trust and confidence. We are all challenged with increased criminal activity in our countries. Chronic delays in getting trials heard, delays with delivery of judgments, the slow pace at which criminal trials are concluded, increasing backlogs and lengthy disposition cycles, challenges with offenders who are already admitted to bail, and shortages in lawyers at the criminal bar. I am confident in saying that in the Bahamas, while public criticism by stakeholders abounds, all branches recognize the value of collaboration in advancing the governance of our country. It gives me great satisfaction to be able to say to the public we serve that the relationship between the judiciary and other branches of government are on a firm foundation of mutual trust and respect. The fact that both of you, Honorable Prime Minister and Honorable Attorney General, have taken the time to bring remarks today to this gathering is itself a testament to this fact. As we reach the end of the transition period for the implementation of the Court Services Council, it would be remiss of me not to say something about the independence of judiciary, especially considering events around the world where the independence of the judiciary remains under extreme threat. In the Bahamas, we are proud of our leading efforts to legislate for the independence of the judiciary, to give life to this vital constitutional construct. As judges, our independence in our courtrooms and decision-making has never been in doubt, but financial and administrative independence has historically been tied to executive action. The Court Services Act 2023, which came into effect on the 1st of July 2024, seeks to remediate this and to achieve 4 goals. 1, to enhance the independence of the judiciary by placing the courts under the administration of an autonomous body. 2, to confer the Council with the power to provide the courts with administrative facilities and services necessary for the proper administration of justice. 3, to enable the judiciary to manage its administrative and financial affairs. And 4, to promote transparency, accountability in the administration of justice. Under the Court Services Act, the judiciary now decides on issues of hiring, promotions, and deployment of staff, the creation of posts within the judiciary and qualifications for such posts, salary entitlements, terms and conditions, management of court property, allocation of revenues, and priority of expenditure, all of which, of course, are subject to proper accounting practices, annual reporting, and expenditure in accordance with the Procurement Act and other relevant legislation. The Court Services Act provides a mechanism for the Council to agree a fair budget allocation with the Ministry of Finance. It is a mature executive and Parliament which would devolve financial and administrative power and control to the judiciary, albeit after 50 years of independence. I therefore continue to commend the Right Honourable Prime Minister and the Attorney General for bringing this transformative legislation to life, thereby giving effect to the constitutional mandate of a fair, independent, and impartial court. While the conference agenda is compacted, we have managed to set aside some time for some sightseeing and outdoor activities to afford our guests a taste of these beautiful islands. In closing, please allow me to take a moment to thank all of the hard-working members of the local organizing committee and the Court Services Council who work tirelessly to ensure the success of this conference. I know that I run the risk of leaving people out who may have provided valuable support, so let me begin by thanking all of those who played any role, large or small, in preparing for this conference. But nonetheless, please allow me to express gratitude to Court Service Council Acting CEO Mildred Bodie, Acting Registrar Ronaldo Toot and their teams, Roger Smith, Jeffrey Hepburn, Security Director Stephen Seymour, to Justices Smith, Justice of Appeal Smith, Justice of Appeal Turner, Justices Lewis, Johnson, Darvel, Gomez, and Card Stubbs, who contributed significantly to the conference agenda and other important organizational logistics of the conference. To the exceptional team from the Cabinet Office, led by Janine McCartney, Carolyn Conliffe, and Dorothy Smith, who lent valuable support in all aspects of the planning. I also extend gratitude to our partners in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Terry Archer and his team, the Royal Bahamas Police Force, Superintendent Knowles and the SIB team, and of course to the Minister of Finance and the Financial Secretary, who made available the necessary funding for this conference. Finally, let me again thank each of you for taking the time this evening to attend this ceremony. Your presence is an affirmation of the importance of this conference. Thank you.
And thank you very much for your remarks. I do apologize for not setting the protocol prior to you coming here, but I do have to say that you did an excellent job, and were it left up to me to look into the crowd and to welcome folks, you certainly would have issued a bench warrant for me massacring that exercise. I gladly admit that I do not know by face members of the judiciary and those who sit in the courts. I do not spend a lot of time in court. As a matter of fact, the few have been to pay my speeding tickets. But I am happy to say, as I see the Commissioner of Police looking on, that I have reformed and been rehabilitated from those younger speeding days. Ladies and gentlemen, as we move along in tonight's program, I do have the honor of introducing a man I do know by name and by face and by profession, as I have had the honor of interviewing him, questioning him, and even grilling him from time to time in this role and others. But certainly tonight my job is very simple, and that is certainly just to introduce him. Please help me in welcoming to the podium now to render remarks the Honorable Ryan Pinder, our Attorney General and Minister of Legal Affairs.
Good evening, and I want to thank the Chief Justice for bringing protocol. I certainly would have missed a whole host of people. Your Excellencies, Honorable Chief Justices, Heads of Judiciary, distinguished delegates, we are privileged to host this distinguished gathering of judicial leaders from across the region. Individuals who carry the immense responsibility of upholding justice, of protecting rights, and ensuring that the rule of law underpins our societies. This conference is extremely important. Its contribution to the administration of justice throughout our region cannot be understated. Judicial systems, we know, throughout our region are experiencing many of the same challenges, and the Chief Justice spoke of some of those challenges that we, as small island countries throughout the region, are experiencing. And we must address these issues. Under our administration, we have been aggressive in our legislative agenda to try to assist with the challenges that the Chief Justice has mentioned. We amended the Magistrates Act to increase the financial thresholds of jurisdiction of a magistrate to hear certain matters and adjust the maximum penalties that could be awarded. The broadening of the jurisdiction of the Magistrates Court is intended to rebalance cases between the Supreme Court and the Magistrates Court to relieve the volume of minor disputes from the calendar of the Supreme Court. As mentioned by the Chief Justice, we passed the Court Services Act, which empowers the Judiciary of the Bahamas to operate autonomously from an administrative point of view and takes away the oversight and a lot of times the bureaucracy that occurred from the central government when it comes to the functions and good governance of the judiciary. It certainly, I think, provides for a more efficient administration and operation of the judiciary. We amended the Supreme Court Act to increase the maximum number of judges in the Supreme Court from 20 to 25. This is a significant amendment, increasing the capacity to conduct trials in the Supreme Court by 25%. We amended the Bail Act. The Chief Justice mentioned challenges with bail and people out on bail. We amended the Bail Act to require an accused who is granted bail to enter into a reconnaissance of bail with conditions to which the grant of bail is subject. The amendment also provides that the breach of any of the conditions contained in the reconnaissance of bail shall result in that bail being void. The legislation provides for 3 conditions mandated to be in the reconnaissance of bail. The accused person shall not commit an offense while on bail, shall not interfere with witnesses, and shall duly appear at the time and place of trial or of an adjourned hearing and not depart the court without leave. Any violation of those mandatory conditions results in bail being void. We passed Anti-Gang Act. Certainly we have an issue throughout the region with violent crimes. We passed the Anti-Gang Act, which makes provision for maintaining public safety and order by discouraging membership in gangs, suppressing and punishing participations of gang members in serious offenses and in gang-related activities. The Act makes it unlawful to be a gang leader or a gang member and prescribes the evidence which is admissible to prove membership in a gang. That has always been a challenge. How do you prove membership in a gang? We legislate the foundational elements of how you now approve membership in that gang. We also passed the Trial by Judge Alone Miscellaneous Provisions Act, which grants the right of election to persons charged with indictable offenses in the Supreme Court to be tried by judge alone. The Act provides that the accused persons on arraignment in the Supreme Court may waive their right to a jury trial and elect trial by jury alone, but only after they have either sought and received legal advice or waived their right to such advice. We have had an aggressive, tough-on-crime legislative agenda coupled with legislation to enhance the operations of the court systems of our country. That has been a mandate of the Prime Minister. But this is not the end of our legislative agenda when it comes to being tough on crime and when it comes to the administration of justice. We have drafted a new penal code that is going to be soon out for public consultation, that is intended to reflect best practices and ensure that it is fit for purpose. Our penal code goes back, I think, to the 1920s here in the country. These will go hand in hand with new sentencing guidelines that Chief Justice is working on that are also being drafted and will be released together. You have a new penal code with new sentencing guidelines to ensure that you have a best practices and fit for purpose, comprehensive system when it comes to criminal justice. We drafted a new firearms bill that are in the final stages of being worked on with the police and will soon be out for public consultation. This is an important piece of legislation because the use of firearms and what is a firearm has progressed dramatically from the days of which our firearms legislation has been put in place. It will have much wider coverage of illegal firearms, including gun kits, assembling firearms from gun kits, as well as the production of 3D firearms. We now, I know throughout the region, you're probably struggling with the same thing. You have 3D printed firearms on the streets. The bill will apply specifically to ghost guns. These are inherently dangerous, they're unregulated, they have no manufacturer's name on it, no serial number, and impossible to trace. These are on our streets. We will prohibit the acquisition of high-powered firearms, of assault weapons, submachine guns, machine guns, and the component parts of those firearms. The ammunition for those specific firearms and the accessories that may be used to convert a licensed firearm into what would otherwise be a prohibited firearm. Our firearms bill goes back to the 1960s. It was amended in 2014, I think. But the use of firearms and the types of firearms and violent crimes using firearms has progressed dramatically since then. We also believe that the judicial system should have the resources, the technology, and the infrastructure to do their jobs and ensure that justice is preserved. We have supported the digitization of the court system, supporting e-filing of matters which assist in the efficiency of hearings that are being conducted. We have opened a new family court complex to ensure that family matters are heard with the decency and the privacy that is required in family matters. We will soon break ground, Prime Minister and Minister of Finance, on a new Supreme Court judicial complex, hoping to break ground this very calendar year. This will ensure that the judges have the physical infrastructure, the technology, and the modern facilities necessary to adjudicate matters in this era in which we live. I know the Supreme Court judges are very happy to hear that. The new Supreme Court complex will also provide and allow for space necessary to roll out additional specialty courts. You heard that we talked about the family court. We intend on having a sexual offenses court, a juvenile court, a new coroner's court, and a commercial court. A new Supreme Court complex would give us the space to allow us to now develop these specialty courts. We believe that these courts will help with the administration of justice and help with the efficiencies that are required to ensure efficiency in our system. Our government is committed to doing what we can to ensure the effective and the efficient administration of justice. We have asked the judiciary to likewise give the same commitment which is within their remit. This includes ensuring that decisions are rendered in a timely fashion. In the Bahamas, and I would suspect throughout our region, we struggle with justice delayed because of long waits for decisions to be issued. I know our justices are working very hard to reverse this trend that we have had in our jurisdiction. And I trust throughout the region, you're likewise doing the same with your judiciary. We also need to ensure that trials are not unduly delayed. Firm control by the judges over their courtrooms and the attorneys before the courts is a requirement. Our Prime Minister always speaks about when he was in private practice doing criminal trials. A murder trial may have taken weeks to conclude. And now we're talking about trials taking many months to conclude. We must work collectively to shorten the time for trials to be concluded. It is a material factor in the long delays of criminal matters actually getting to court, because a judge can only have so many matters on his calendar. And if those matters extend months and months when they should not extend so often, then the calendar gets backed up, then courts get backed up, then bringing things to court gets backed up. And then you hear the public criticism that the Chief Justice spoke about it's taking years to get this criminal matter to court. We must control our courtrooms. It's very important. We all have a common interest here, all of us, in ensuring that the efficient administration of justice in our countries and throughout the region happens, and it's a reality. This conference allows us to collectively speak to the challenges, opportunities, and improvements that can be had in our judicial system. Ensuring that justice is served effectively and efficiently is not only good order in our societies, but it is vital to the public confidence of our institutions themselves. The last thing we want is our populace having no confidence in our judicial system, having no confidence in our law enforcement system, and having certainly no confidence in our government system to be able to handle these matters. And the effective and efficient administration of justice underpins this confidence. So as you deliberate over the next few days, I encourage you to have a constructive and a thought-provoking conference. Create bonds, certainly relationships, and strategies that will enhance our region. I thank you for the opportunity, Chief Justice, to bring these short remarks, and I invite you to enjoy our beautiful country. The Chief Justice said he has some excursions and other things of leisure planned as well, and I encourage you to take them up. I want to thank you. Again, welcome to the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, and I encourage you to have a great conference. Thank you very much.
To our Attorney General, thank you very much, sir, for those comprehensive remarks. And sounds like we have lots and lots and lots of courts coming. Lots of courts. And so I know that you mentioned the legislation that makes it illegal to be a part of a gang, but having so many courts now, I need to sign up to be in the army of the Lord to ensure that I avoid those courts. Ladies and gentlemen, as we move along in our program, you would have already heard that our guests will have an opportunity to enjoy some of the sights of our beautiful country and get to experience a bit of leisure time. But we wanted to get you started to experience a bit of the culture of the Bahamas. And so we brought out one of our national treasures and decided to put that on display for you. Those of you who are native to the Bahamas know and love this treasure very well. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my honor to introduce now definitely one of our great treasures, the Bahamas National Youth Choir. We have no mics, but we'll do our best. gentlemen, another round of applause for the Bahamas National Youth Choir. And while they did not have any microphones, if I could step out of character for just 1 second, these Caribbean people by me need no mic. But thank you very much to the Bahamas National Youth Choir for getting our entertainment started this evening, because we do have a bit more for you. But as we move along in the program now, we move to one of the most important parts of the evening, and that is our keynote address. And my job is to simply introduce the individual who you know and have heard from already, who will be coming to introduce our keynote speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, again, help me welcome to the podium our Chief Justice, the Honorable Sir Ian Winder, to come and introduce tonight's keynote speaker.
Good evening again. I'm not sure if the poor Prime Minister has anything left to say after the Attorney General did his mini keynote. But ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, it is my distinct honor and privilege to introduce to you a leader whose life and career have been defined by service, resilience, and unwavering commitment to justice and national development. The Right Honourable Philip Edward Brave Davis, King's Counsel, MP, JP, is the 5th Prime Minister of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, a son of the majestic island of Cat Island, and a proud Bahamian. Prime Minister Davis has dedicated decades to public life. Before entering frontline politics, Philip Davis, then, was a lawyer of considerable repute. From humble beginnings, he rose through the legal profession to become a respected advocate. A former president of the Bar Association, Prime Minister Davis was a member of the Council of Legal Education and served as a member of the committee that produced the seminal Barnett Report. In my view, he remains the foremost authority in the Bahamas on extradition law and election law. As a former magistrate and long-standing member of Parliament, he brings to this forum not only the voice of government, but also the insight of a legal mind shaped by experience and empathy. Please be upstanding and join me in welcoming Prime Minister Philip Davis, the Right Honourable Prime Minister of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas.
Please be seated. It is settings like these, and I look at my so Michael Barnett is laughing his head off because he's one of my teasers. Continues to remind me that I may be in the wrong job because I missed the profession so much. And he continues to remind me. And in settings like these, that truly brings me back to what I'm really all about. And that is ensuring that the rule of law continues to underpin what we're all about, not just in the Bahamas, but in the Caribbean and the wider common law jurisdictions. But colleagues and distinguished guests, our Governor General, Most Honorable Cynthia Mother Pratt, to all of my distinguished colleagues in the audience, justices and friends, it's really a pleasure to see so many of our region's sharpest legal minds gathered under one roof. Welcome to the Bahamas, my friends, and I hope we have made you feel at home. And of course, welcome to the 2025 Conference of Chief Justices and Heads of the Judiciaries of the Caribbean. I recall when, I guess it was 38 years ago, when the idea was born. I think it was Chief Justice Telford Georges back then who birthed the idea that we should that chief justices and heads of judiciaries, quite apart from meeting at Council of Legal Education, that they should have their own separate meetings to have exchanges as you will be having here. I think at the same time he was mooting the continuing judicial education concept that most justices at that time resisted. But we are honored to be able to host this important regional forum. As you would have heard, the last time this conference was held here was in 2011, and so it is indeed a pleasure to witness its return. The theme for this year's conference is a timely one: judiciaries in transition. Transition is an appropriate term for the moment in which we find ourselves, with AI and other emerging technologies reshaping the way we deliver justice, and with the demographic shifts and climate change altering the very texture of our societies. Transition is not simply a descriptor for Caribbean judiciaries. It is an imperative. It cannot be business as usual if we endeavor to deliver fair, efficient 21st century justice. Our history is rich, and it is indeed pushing us along. But to keep up with the evolving legal landscapes in which we find ourselves, we must abandon the comforts of existing bureaucracy and embrace transition. Caribbean judiciaries in transition must weigh the costs and benefits, for example, of expanding capacity. In some contexts, the benefits, for example, of a specialized court do not outweigh the costs. But here in the Bahamas, we found that our system would benefit significantly from expanded capacity, both in terms of reduced case backlogs and improved public confidence in the judiciary. And so, as you would have heard from the Attorney General, at the end of last year, we opened a new specialized court for family matters on the island here of New Providence. The family unit is, after all, the bedrock of our societies. Our families take many forms, and they deserve a justice system that responds to their unique, manifold needs. For Bahamian families navigating disputes, custody arrangements, and other complex circumstances, there was a need for expanded court capacity. We recognize that need. Consideration, clarity, and closure is what our people deserve, and so we got to work. We opened the family court complex last December, as you would have heard from our Attorney General, as part of our broader mission to modernize the Bahamian judicial system. Upgrades to existing court campuses in downtown Nassau, including renovations to the main Supreme Court buildings, are also underway, as is the construction of a new mediation court scheduled for completion by the end of this summer. Additional resources are being mobilized to digitalize our court files throughout the judiciary of the Bahamas, with the introduction of electronic filings and integrated case management systems representing further improvements. Criminal justice reform is also a significant facet of our modernization agenda, in line with the Needham's Point Declaration adopted by Caribbean leaders at Bridgetown in October 2023. We have done a number of reforms, as you would have heard earlier from our Attorney General. As we improve our capacity to deliver justice, we nevertheless recognize that, as an archipelago, the issue of access remains a challenge. The Bahamas, of course, is not alone in this regard. Twin island states like Trinidad and Tobago, as well as multi-island states like St. Vincent and the Grenadines and Turks and Caicos, face similar issues of distributing justice to dispersed populations. Here, however, lies our greatest opportunity to transition toward greater judicial access and impact. Digital solutions, such as remote hearings, represent one means of enhancing access to justice by eliminating the financial burden of traveling to urban centers from the Family Islands to Nassau, for example. Mobile justice services, traveling legal clinics, and community legal education programs can empower residents in rural areas to better navigate the legal landscape. At our Bahamas Department of Corrections, for instance, provisions for a virtual court have been made to advance progress on this very front. For the 11 judiciaries represented here today, the innovations adopted to improve the administration of justice will, of course, be influenced by the particularities of local contexts. No matter the tools adopted, we must ensure that in getting ahead of the digital curve, we not leave our elders and other vulnerable citizens behind. Judiciaries in transition must stay tuned to the needs of the most vulnerable to ensure efficiency does not come at the expense of equity. Innovation, education, and access go hand in hand, my friends. That is how justice systems transition justly. Legal judgments do not exist in a vacuum. They profoundly impact the lives of our people. Without fairness, impartiality, and efficiency, our justice systems risk the perceived credibility and its public confidence in the judiciary and the separation of powers, which underpins the stability of our democracies. Recent surveys note a perception of low confidence in Caribbean judicial systems. This perception cannot be disregarded, not least in a season of transition. Public confidence is not a given. It must be nurtured and kept. What an individual believes about their justice system, whether it is open to them, whether it will work for them, whether it can deliver a resolution swiftly and soundly for them, will determine if and how they engage with it. The smallness of our societies, though typically framed as a challenge, is in this case an opportunity. Make the right changes and get the right message out about these changes, and public perception will improve. At its core, increasing public confidence begins with modernizing our systems with the most vulnerable in mind. It means fair compensation for public defenders. It means safeguarding anonymity in sensitive cases. It means swift justice. And it means developing a watertight AI policy and embracing digital solutions that expand access to justice. A just future for Caribbean judiciaries will depend on our capacity to transition justly from the bottom up. Right here, right now, we have an opportunity to define the trajectory of that transition. Let's do it with a clear moral vision of a justice system that is accessible and trusted by everyone. My friends, may you have a fruitful and exciting conference, and may the conversations you have in the days ahead shape our judicial systems for the better. I want to thank each and every one of you for participating, and may God bless all of you. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, a round of applause again for our esteemed Prime Minister, the Honourable Philip Davis. Thank you very much, sir, for your remarks. You certainly have issued a clarion call and a call to order and a call to action to all assembled here. Thank you so very much for your opening remarks. As we move now towards the latter part of our program this evening, we certainly could not leave you, especially our visitors, without an indigenous taste of the Bahamas. So you got a bit of our treasure, but now we are going to take you to a place and a space that is truly Bahamian. The cultural icons will say that it originated in the home of the Prime Minister in Cat Island. There are others who would dispute that, but in this setting, I'm going to go with the Prime Minister's Island, Cat Island. So ladies and gentlemen, those of you who are familiar, well, you know what to do. And those of you who are visiting, I invite you to take in the indigenous sounds of the Bahamas. Rhythm and youth, we call it rake and scrape. So they are a rake and scrape band. Please help me welcome this very talented group of young people. Rhythm and youth, our rake and scrape band. right, let's give them another round of applause. What a magnificent display of talent, the immense talent that we have in our country and in our region. I know many of you were thinking the same thing that I was thinking as I sat there. If I did not have on this suit, and if I was not in this place, in this setting, this was going to be a very different occasion. But we thank them so much for talent, and for the talent that they displayed. And we share a lot of commonalities throughout the Caribbean. But there's one thing that is undeniable, and that is the music. No matter where you go in this part of the world, the music speaks to who we are, to our culture, to our ancestry, even to our passion as a people. And so we know that long after all of us have gone on, the music will live on and speak to who we are as a people. So we thank you so very much. I ask your indulgence for just a moment before we move to the last bit of entertainment for tonight and literally rush you out of here. I've been asked to assemble very quickly an official photo. If you would please indulge me. Your Excellency, please, Prime Minister and Chief Justices, would you please join us here at the front for an official photograph? Governor General, our Prime Minister, our Attorney General, and our Chief Justices, please, for an official photo. And while we do that, I would like to also take a moment to recognize and welcome the spouses of some of our Chief Justices who have accompanied them here. Please give them a round of applause and welcome them to the Bahamas. I trust that as the meetings and deliberations are going on, you too will get to enjoy a little bit more of what we have to offer. And so we welcome you to explore all that the island has to offer. Thank you very much to our guests for accommodating our official photo. We do appreciate it. I just would like to point out very quickly that they never asked the MC to stand in any photos. But I guess it's just one of the hazards of the job. Nonetheless, ladies and gentlemen, we have come to the end of our program. But as we brought you quite a bit of welcome remarks, speeches, and really gave you a snapshot into a lot of the changes and progress that is being made within the judicial system of the Bahamas and the judiciary, we thought it important to bring the right amount of balance to tonight's program. And so as we encourage you to deliberate and to work hard, we've also encouraged you to play hard. And we're going to set the tone with that tonight. And so you experienced our treasure in the National Youth Choir. You experienced a bit of our indigenous music in the rake and scrape and in the band. But certainly you cannot come to the Bahamas. You cannot mention the Bahamas. You cannot be immersed in the culture of the Bahamas without Junkanoo. And so, ladies and gentlemen, in our final bit of performance tonight, please help me welcome into the room that thing that defines us and makes us different. We are so passionate about, we love, and we can never do without. Please welcome tonight's Junkanoo group, and please feel free to get up and enjoy. you see why it is really the foremost expression of our culture. A round of applause for our Jonkanu group and the band now. For our visitors, the only thing that we argue more about in this country than politics is Jonkanu. And so they didn't tell me the name of the Jonkanu band, so I'm not going to say, I'm not going to guess. I don't need that smoke on the outside. Ladies and gentlemen, it has been my honor and privilege to be your chairperson for tonight and to guide you through this program. To our visiting guests and those of you who will be involved over the next few days, we wish you all the best. You certainly have been given lots to think about as you move forward. And we as people of the Caribbean look to you. We really look to you to keep our country safe, to keep our judiciary safe, and to keep that balance in our universe. So we thank you so very much for the work that you do and will continue to do. To our Governor General, Your Excellency, thank you so much for joining us and for being a part of this and continuing to be who you are to our country. Thank you so very much. Mr. Prime Minister, heavy is the head that wears the crown. And so we wish you continued prayers as you continue to lead this country with a steady hand. We thank you for the work that you do, for the long nights, the early mornings, the endless calls, and sometimes and even ungrateful people. But we thank you nonetheless for the work that you do, and please continue to be encouraged. Mr. Attorney General, thank you so very much. I promise no questions. None tonight for me. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so very much for being a part of this ceremony tonight. Thank you for joining us. We wish you all the best, and we invite you to join us on the outside for a short reception courtesy of our host. So thank you so very much, and good evening. So I please stand for the departure of Her Excellency, our Governor General,
Well, Justice Constance Delancey, it ain't over until there's a Jonkanu rush out, eh?
It's true.
But really, your thoughts of this opening ceremony, and particularly the remarks from the Prime Minister, the Attorney General, and of course the Chief Justice.
Well, I said in the beginning when we had our conversation that the Prime Minister would speak on behalf of the people. And yes, he underscored that there is no point in having courts developed if you do not put systems in place to protect the most vulnerable amongst us. We have a long history in the Bahamas of going to the people, our magistrates have circuits, and now with digital technology we can bring the courtroom to the people without having the expense of them having to travel from the family islands. And I think it's important. I see that our AG has forecasted that they're going to finally bring our penal code into the 21st century, because we have a very old, antiquated set of laws, and it is the primary piece of legislation for criminal matters. And so I welcome that's coming. That's a long time overdue. And we will need specialty courts because, let's face it, the things that are happening in our society today demands that we put special emphasis on certain areas to protect, again, those of us who are most vulnerable. We have to put in places systems that work for the elderly, systems that work for the children, and systems that work for people all the way in Inagua. So we can't forget them simply because they are farther away.
And of course, this is called Justice in Transition, which is a very suitable name or appropriate name for the times we're in, on it.
Yes, it is, because we're now moving from paper to digital. And in doing so, we need to make sure that we put the proper protocols and policies in place, again, to bring justice to people in a timely fashion, so that cases are heard properly and fairly.
Mm-hmm. Well, really would like to thank you for being part of this broadcast today, tonight, really, and love the insights you've given us. And I want to thank you on behalf of the Bahamian people for your continued contribution to this country and your outstanding contribution to this country.
It's my pleasure to serve my country.
It's greatly appreciated. And we thank you all for joining us. We're going to end this broadcast, which has been a collaboration of the Bahamas Information Services and the Broadcasting Corporation of the Bahamas. Good night.